If you recently got your bone density DEXA scan results and you don't know what they mean, you will at the end of this video. Here's what you can expect to learn. First, what is a DEXA scan? Then, we'll talk about accuracy. Just because it's high tech, does that mean it's high accuracy? You'll learn about that in this section. Then, we'll talk about how to interpret your DEXA scan results. We will have exactly a report of a DEXA scan and break it down section by section and in simple terms explain what does each section mean. Then we'll talk about why one area can change and others don't. In other words, you might get 3 or 4 areas measured, but they don't all improve at the same speed or the same amount. And finally, we'll talk about the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to DEXA scan interpretation. Before we jump in, who am I? My name is Igor. I'm the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Osteoporosis Reversal Secrets. As well, I'm not just some random guy on the internet with an opinion. I actually run an online personal training company that specializes in osteoporosis reversal. We work with real people to help them reverse their osteoporosis. So, first of all, what is a DEXA scan? DEXA stands for Dual Energy X-ray Absorptiometry. It has very low radiation, so don't be concerned. It's not like an X-ray. The amount of radiation is extremely, extremely low. You would need to get a DEXA scan 50 times to equal what you get in one flight. So nothing to worry about there. So what exactly is DEXA scan? It measures bone mineral density. Now listen to those terms. Bone mineral density. It only measures the mineral content of bone. It doesn't measure everything. It just measures the mineral content. There are um, components of bone that are not minerals, and the DEXA scan does not measure those. So again, it only pertains to the mineral content of bone, not just calcium, but all minerals. So typically, a DEXA scan looks at your lumbar spine, that's your lower back, the femoral neck, which is there's a bone called the femur, that's the thigh bone, and the bulb at the end of the bone is called the head. Just for the head is the neck. Then it also scans the total hip as well as the forearm occasionally. Not always, but probably about 10-15% of the time, you get your forearm or your wrist scanned as well. Now, that brings us to the accuracy of DEXA scans. Is it high tech? Yes. Does high tech mean perfect accuracy? No. It has okay accuracy, not great, but not terrible, not so bad we shouldn't use it. So the measurement error does vary based on where you're scanning. The lumbar spine has a 1% measurement error. The total hip has 1 to 2%, and the femoral neck has 1.5, 2.5% measurement error. That means that if your DEXA scan says that you improve by 1% your lumbar spine, is that you should really be asking yourself, is that really an improvement? Is that me holding my bone density, or is that just measurement error? So now let's talk about how to interpret your DEXA scan results. Let's go section by section and see what do these sections mean. Let's start at the top. The top of the report just gives you some basic patient information like your name, date of birth, height, and so on. The next part is a scanned picture of the area being reported. So here is an example of that report right next to this. Let's say hypothetically this is the lumbar spine. You have a chart, a bar, a graph like this, and shows you this is the normal range, this is the osteopenia range, and this is the osteoporosis range. And then with a black dot, it places you on the chart where your bone density falls for that region. It also has it for different regions. So you might have one of those for the lumbar spine, you might have one of those for the femoral neck, and then a third one potentially for the total hip or the forearm or the wrist, depending on where you got scanned. Next, you'll actually have a comparison of your bone density to a couple of things. So sometimes with the lumbar spine, it breaks it down literally vertebra by vertebrae and says exactly what is the raw bone density at each vertebra. Now, what does that mean? It then compares your bone density to the average of a young adult. Now, if you're thinking, I don't want to compare myself to a young adult, well, yes, you do. You want to compare yourself to what is the peak bone mass. Bone mass for Caucasians and Black people peaks around 25 to 30. In Asians, peaks between 18 and 20. So you want to know how do you compare not to other people your age who've already declined. You want to compare to yourself to peak bone mass. But just for curiosity's sake, it also compares you to other people your age. So a T score compares you to peak bone mass. A Z or a Z score compares you to other people your age. Are you on par with them? If you score 0, you have exactly average bone density for somebody your age. If you have a score in the negatives, it means you are worse than other people your age. If you have a score in the positives, like +1, +1.2, etc., you are slightly better than people your age. And not only does it measure your bone density compared to peak bone mass and other your age, it also compares you in previous years, both in absolute terms, grams per cubic centimeter, as well as in relative terms as a percentage. So now you know how to read a DEXA scan very accurately. Now let's talk about why one area can change and others don't. There are a number of different reasons. Some of them having to do with how you intervene with osteoporosis. If you're using exercise to improve your osteoporosis, well, different exercises work different bones. So you might have gotten more emphasis for some bones than other bones. Maybe some bones are more responsive than other bones, even with the same amount of emphasis, and so on. Also, within bone, there are two categories. There's something called trabecular bone and something called cortical bone. Trabecular bone is the spongy part of the bone on the inside. The cortical bone is the outer shell of the bone. Not every bone has an equal ratio of cortical to trabecular bone. Some bones have more cortical and less trabecular, and the other way around. Bones that have more cortical bone improve slower than bones that have more trabecular bone. And that's why you'll often see the femoral neck is very, very stubborn. It has a high amount of cortical bone and fewer and a lower amount of trabecular bone. So that's one reason. Maybe somebody just um, is either exercising not all bones equally, or some bones are more responsive due to their ratio trabecular to cortical. But there are also just some technical differences. One is simply positioning. If you were positioned one year one way, and then the next year you were positioned a different way, that can change the results of the DEXA scan. Something as simple as that has nothing to do with your actual bone strength, just what is the DEXA scan scanning? Is it the same part of the bone as it did the last time you did it? Now let's talk about the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to DEXA scan interpretation. One mistake is comparing scans from different machines. DEXA scans have decent accuracy, but not perfect accuracy. So ideally, you can scan on the same machine every time. And if you do get two scans with two different machines, um, and they are within 1 to 2.5% apart, that's still within measurement error. Now, if the gap is much bigger than that, then you can probably attribute that to legitimate changes. But don't neglect measurement error, which is our second mistake. Measurement error is real. If you're slightly better or slightly worse, that may not necessarily be a true reflection of improvement or decline. It may just be measurement error. And a final mistake people often make is assuming that bone mineral density tells you the entire fracture risk story. A lot of people equate bone density to fracture risk. Bone density is one component of fracture risk, but just one. There are 4 other components of fracture risk that are not measured by DEXA scan. I cover those in much greater detail in my video titled "The 5 Real Drivers of Fracture Risk." Again, it's not just bone density. This video is on your screen right now, or the link to it, and if you want, check it out there. If you want to dive much deeper into how to improve your bone density naturally and without medications, I have a special video for the viewers of this video titled "The Stronger Bones Checklist." This video is not available on YouTube, but it is available to you for free to download at this link on your screen right now or in the description below.